gonna play football. Yippee!
Into the end zone, wide open. Room service. Hesstock with the touchdown.
Ryland on its way. And good.
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hey, well, thank you for that introduction, Mr. Tommy Palmer, his own self. We always appreciate hearing from our voice, your voice, and the guy who introduces everything, the one and only legend himself, Tommy Palmer. You are listening to The Review. It's the OSG Sports team talking college football, taking a look at what guys can only be termed as an interesting weekend. Of course, I would be negligent in my duty if I did not mention that both Brother John and Brother Wilkie join us this week. OSG Nelson, Jay Wilkerson 16. Guys, if you don't mind, I kind of want to start with a game that jumped off the table for me, and that's UCF versus Stanford. For all the grief that UCF gets about not scheduling and not playing Power 5 teams and not beating Power 5 teams, they didn't just beat Stanford this week. They pounded Stanford this week. Should UCF be taken seriously now?
Into the end zone. Contact, flag, touchdown, Nixon. Touchdown, Knights open, touchdown. They got it like that.
Wilkie, go ahead and go for it.
You always defer to me.
Yes, I do.
To me, it's kind of a one-off right now for me. I kind of expected UCF to win this game. You got a Northern California team, a NoCal team, coming into Central Florida in record heat in September. And you saw some of that fatigue early on in the game. But UCF is as good as they are, but I just don't know if they are the consistent winner in the Power 5 level yet. So jury's still out with me as far as UCF. But I thought it was an impressive win by the Knights over the Cardinal.
No doubt. I honestly didn't think that UCF would cover. I thought that Stanford would be there and it would be a lot tighter than it actually was. The result did not surprise me that UCF won because Stanford having to pack up their lives and come across the country from one end to the other. But the margin was what surprised me more than anything else when you're talking about UCF. And of course, that this will be the self-imposed springboard for UCF to sit there and say, yes, we should be taken seriously. You know, look at me, look at me, look at me. Jury's still out for me too, Phil.
Well, I one thing I thought that UCF had the edge was in speed. I mean, Stanford under David Shaw is a solid football team, no doubt. But they're not the fastest team. Now you're going down to a team that's just loaded with speed. And they were just a step and a half ahead of Stanford the whole time. Stanford relied way too much, as they always do, on that power football game. But I thought the speed of Central Florida was the telltale sign in this one.
I mean, you're talking about a Stanford program that's been a perennial top 20 team for the last, decade? And UCF was up 38-3 after 3 quarters. I mean, that tells me something right there. And yes, I grant you the Pac-12 is probably on the level of the ACC this year when it comes to depth of their teams. Stanford, probably not the Stanford team of last year or the year before. But, man, I watched part of that game, and they offered very little resistance. I think what would be a better test is this coming week, the Knights travel up to Pittsburgh to play the Panthers, who gave Penn State all they could handle this week as well.
And I was somewhat impressed with Pitt in that game. Pitt doesn't have the team speed that UCF has, but they have enough of it with Maurice French who can stretch the field. And I think what to me is with Pitt, they've got some really good guys on the line there. They're tough and physical. And I think while Stanford was that way, I thought they tended to wilt in that Florida heat. It won't be that hot in Pittsburgh this weekend. And I want to see who dictates the terms on the line when UCF and Pitt play at Heinz Field on Saturday.
Well, the last thing I'll add about this is we've already got our weekly Associated Press poll after this week, and despite dominating Stanford, UCF didn't move up from, I think it was 14th. And should that be a question as well? Because I'm not so sure I think they might actually be better than quite a few teams ranked ahead of.
But remember, when you're talking about rankings, Phil, usually it's the established ones, and it's going to take a lot for those established teams, as long as they continue to win, to get knocked off and have something happen below them. So the teams that are below them in the rankings, say 25 to 15, they're the ones that have to continue banging up against that glass ceiling and then wait for that team in 1 through 10 or 1 through 14 ahead of them to do something catastrophic or do something unimpressive for that team who's right there at 15 to kind of work their way up. Early on, I think right now, because of scheduling being what it is with all of the out-of-conference games that you have, I think really for 1 through 14, 1 through 15, it's about maintain. And for 15 to 25, it's about making that mark, Wilkie, to make sure that everything is squared away. So when somebody does fall, you're the first team that gets the lucky dog and gets inside that top 15.
Yeah, you got to be in position to be able to make those bold moves. UCF at 15, to me, that's about where they should be. And let's see if they have another impressive win over Pitt. They got to hope that the two Big Ten teams in front of them, Wisconsin, Penn State, lay an egg. Right now I think 15 is about where they can be. Can they pass the eye test against the Pittsburgh team? Because then you're going into the American Conference season, and I just don't know if those games will carry the weight that they need to going after getting through your non-con season. Because really, when you look at the American, Houston's got some street cred. UCF, they're a little down this year. So Temple looks like they've got still got it going on, but they just don't really pass the eye test with the voters and those who are, the committee that's getting the teams into the playoff and the New Year's Six bowls.
And you brought up Maryland, and I'll go or Maryland. You brought up Temple. The Temple Owls with an upset win over the Maryland Terrapins, 20-17. Temple goes to 2-0 on the season. We talked the first week and the second week really about the resurgent Maryland team all of a sudden finding their offensive groove under Mike Loxley. Temple may have put one on them. I mean, Anthony Russo, 20 for 37, 3 touchdowns. Good performance by him. 132 yards receiving for Jaden Blue. Is this where the little guy bites back, or maybe Maryland a little bit overrated going into this game?
I think, honestly, it's Maryland coming back to the pack a little bit. I know that coming into the season, we had a self-imposed expectation on Mike Loxley as a head coach and what he has not been able to do at the other stops. And then going to the Nick Saban reclamation summer camp and then getting all that squared away to get you in line for another head coaching opportunity. I just think right now that Maryland, you start to believe your own words that you see. But honestly, Wilkie, for me, this was just one where Maryland kind of came back to the pack a little bit, and we saw kind of what we were anticipating with the Terps coming into the year.
Well, I thought Temple did a great job of containing Anthony McFarland, who just ran wild last week against Syracuse. And that Temple defense made some really clutch plays, made some really big stops, and put their offense in a position to be successful. And I thought Temple did a good job with getting some chunk plays here and there. to stretch the field out. And I don't think Maryland was expecting that, and it kind of they didn't know how to respond. But I think the big issue for Maryland is they just could not run inside the tackles, which was successful against Syracuse last week, and they couldn't adjust.
Another interesting game where a Big Ten program kind of struggled a little bit, or another way of putting it might be the Group of Five bite back. Eastern Michigan gets a last-second 24-yard field goal by Chad Ryland in Downs, Illinois, 34-31.
And Chad Ryland with a chance to win it for Eastern Michigan. Ryland on its way. And good.
That's a bad loss for the Illini.
That's bad loss.
They got out to a 2-0 start this season. Is Lovey's seat getting hot already?
Yes. If it wasn't, and I don't know why, maybe somebody forgot to plug in the heater, but that cord has been right there, right up against the wall socket. And I don't know why, if his seat wasn't heated, maybe somebody forgot to turn it on or plug it in coming into the 2019 season. But I think this just reinforces, Wilkie, what we already knew about Illinois and Lovie Smith.
I agree. And now you're getting into the teeth of your Big Ten schedule, because now you host Nebraska, and there's got to be some kind of good showing there. And then it's on the road to Minnesota, and then you got Michigan, then you got Wisconsin at home, which are going to be tough ball games, and then you go to Purdue. So that's your October. And, okay, where are the wins going to come from there in that stretch? So, yeah, I don't see where those wins are going to come until they face Rutgers on November 2nd, which is probably in a worse position right now than Illinois. But, you're staring at maybe 4 wins this year for Illinois in a year that was supposed to show some improvement. And I'm not sure if that's the case right now, especially after, where are they going to be psychologically after losing to Eastern Michigan?
Yeah, I think Lovey is one of several Big Ten coaches that are going to have some question marks surrounding them. I want to talk briefly, and this one's going to hurt me a little bit, guys, so bear with me.
Oh, yeah.
Another Big Ten team that narrowly, and I mean narrowly, escaped was the Minnesota Gophers, who moved to 3-0, but only because they scored a touchdown with 13 seconds to go at home against the Georgia Southern Eagles, who gave the Golden Gophers everything they could handle before running out of gas on the last drive of the game. That makes PJ Fleck's team 3-0. All 3 games have been super, super close. Another Mirage team here, maybe, or just a team running on luck, or are they legit?
I've got to go with Mirage until further notice. But at the same time, I would look at it this way. I would say Mirage, but growing into their season until further notice. I would say that if you're going to have these non-cons, as Wilkie calls them, and I think we're just going to pirate the term from now on, I think that with these non-cons, if you build your way into your schedule and you can prove that you can win the tight ones, maybe this gives you some sense of optimism if you're PJ Fleck heading into the year. I know that Rashad Bateman out of Tift High had a good game once again for the Gophers receiving, but I think that when you go up against a Georgia Southern team, and this one kind of stuck in the back of my head, I'm also thinking that in the locker room to a man, they weren't quite prepared mentally to go up against a Georgia Southern. You sit there and you go, okay, Go 5 school, they're coming up here, they're from Statesboro, we're big bad Big Ten, and then they punch you in the nose and you have to fight for 59 minutes and 47 seconds before you get the game-winning touchdown. So for me, I think that if you're PJ Fleck, you learn a lot more from this one, from what you garnered from the guys probably overestimating Georgia Southern just a little bit. And I think that really it was if you want to use gut check against a Go 5, I'll say I'll go ahead and do that. But this is a game that they should have handled. They did not. And if you're PJ Fleck, you take this one, you take the lessons from it going forward to get you ready, Wilkie, for your Big Ten schedule.
I think what's disturbing if you're a Minnesota fan is in all three games against South Dakota State, Fresno State, and Georgia Southern, you've trailed in the fourth quarter. So I think that's a disturbing trend. The other thing, too, is Minnesota just cannot keep a running back healthy. They've lost Rodney Smith and Cam Wiley, Mohamed Ibrahim, and Shannon Brooks are down to the fifth stringer and Bryce Williams. So now you've really limited your offense with the injuries. And so as Minnesota goes into the Big Ten season, they're off this week, so maybe some of those running back injuries can heal. But then you go to Purdue, and that's gonna, if they're trailing Purdue in the fourth quarter, then that trend is really going to bite them in the backside, because you can only come back so many times before you run out of gas. And Purdue's a quality football team, and they're going to have to learn how to get a lead and keep it in the second half if they're going to be bowling this year.
Want to move on here a little bit before we wrap up the first block here on the review. We are the OSG Sports team. We are talking college football. Don't forget the gratuitous self-promotion here, because you can find us in so many places. If you're watching the video, then you found us on YouTube at OSG Sports. Same place we are on Facebook and on Twitter at OSG Sports. Please do not forget the phone app, as John holds his phone up to the camera with a blurry picture of the app.
I don't have my phone.
Because if you download the app, then you get all of our podcasting content, including that from our partners up in Canada at barnburner.ca. Everything you ever wanted to know about every kind of sport. Guys, briefly here before we kind of bring this first block to a close and talk about some other stuff later in the show. We talked in the first block about how some of these Big Ten teams and some of the other teams struggled with group of fives. None of the really 6 playoff level teams barely really broke a sweat this week, with the exception of maybe Alabama a little bit versus South Carolina.
Yeah, and sorry, Wilkie. I'll make mine really quick. To me, this week, frankly, you had a lot of the big teams that were top 15 that had a lot of big spreads, and I thought that most of these teams would cover those big numbers. I didn't think that they would cover the totals that were posted, considering that totals across the board jumped anywhere from 5 to 6 points from their original number. But for me, short of Alabama being the darkest of backdoor covers that really sent people screaming into the night after that game against South Carolina, I honestly thought that you had a lot of the top-ranked teams with big numbers. I thought they'd clear them, and for the most part, they did, Wilkie.
They did. Alabama got a scare for about a half. That was it. And then they were Alabama again. Not surprised of how the Clemson-Syracuse game, the turnout of that one at all. I saw that coming. Georgia's beatdown of Arkansas State. I don't know if you heard any of Kirby Smart's pregame, when he had his presser earlier this week, but he was really boosting up Arkansas State, and they are a fine program in the Sun Belt, and they've done really well. But Georgia is just so superiorly talented, especially in the line. It wasn't even a game; it was over with in warmups. UCLA and Oklahoma went as expected, and Jalen Hurts right now looks like it's him and Tua Tagovailoa for the Heisman race right now. No questions asked.
And Ohio State rolled too.
Yeah, and Ohio State rolled too. So Justin Fields is going to be in that conversation as well. Going on the flip side, Florida and Kentucky, that didn't surprise me at all. Florida is just doing enough right now to win. And I thought Kentucky, if that Kentucky team of last year was playing at Commonwealth or Kroger Field now.
They're not paying you, it's Commonwealth.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The biggest thing I thought coming out of that Florida game was the injury to Felipe Franks, which is going to cost him the season and possibly change the fortunes of the Gators.
That's true. That's true. And So Florida's got some soul searching to do, I guess is the best way to put it, because without Felipe Franks, I mean, he is so dynamic, but he's so inconsistent. And now they host Tennessee. That's going to be interesting because Tennessee now has a lot of confidence because that game went exactly how it had to go for Tennessee to regain their confidence against Chattanooga. And then you got the Towson coming up before you go into the teeth of your schedule. Florida fans, you need to worry about the October schedule. You host Auburn, and it's the only home game you have in October, and then you're at LSU, at South Carolina, at Georgia. Well, that Georgia game is at Jackson,
usual,
but yeah,
the
you know
usual
what I mean.
Halloween weekend special. Guys, I want to circle back really quick. We were talking about the Arkansas State-Georgia game. Did you see what the Georgia fan base did for Arkansas State?
Very
Blake
cool.
Anderson.
Very
yeah, it was
cool.
great.
What, for all the grief we give the Southeastern Conference fans and for all the grief that they get nationwide for being homers and being kind of the rudest, crudest, most obnoxious, most loud, most beat on your chest kind of fans out of probably everybody, what do things like that tell you about the fan bases?
That when you see something happen at a grassroots level, amazing things can happen. And this was just something that was started on a Twitter post by those that monitor the Bulldog breast cancer account. And they're like, hey, well, let's do something to show support for the Andersons and the Arkansas State community. And over the last couple of seasons, required reading for this week, your homework is the ESPN article that was written about Craig and Wendy Anderson. And you see, really, it happened at Nebraska when they went there for the road trip, where everyone had the banner and showed their support. And then you see this groundswell that comes up from the Bulldog breast cancer account, and the fact that you have the student body that likes to just stand in the front row and do the blackout and go and painting themselves pink. I mean, I think that it shows you the power of social media these days, one. But also when you know that something is going on for the other community. Football is family, and it's not just the guy that's next to you if you're standing on the line with all of your roster mates. It's the fans, and it's the fans respecting other fans in other places. So I think that it just reinforces really what football and what sports can be when you sit there and you have an idea, because you've got an idea, it's a great idea, someone jumps on it and you see what happened. And I give everybody a lot of credit who dressed in pink or painted themselves pink up at Sanford Stadium over the weekend, Wilkie.
I agree. It was, I've never really been one of those guys that criticizes SEC fans because I love the fact they're as passionate as they are. I grew up in the Southern football culture. Well, all of us did. And yeah, from the outside looking in, it does look looks kind of crazy, but most SEC, I would say 95% of SEC fans have a great heart, and that showed it by the Georgia fans. And I know it really, really resonated in Northeast Arkansas as well. Now getting beat down 55-0, probably didn't really soothe over the Red Wolf fans that much, but it was cool to see.
And with that note wrapped up, I think we'll finish here on the first block of the review, the OSG Talking College Football. When we come back in the second block, guys, I want to talk a little bit about a few coaches who might be finding their seats get a little bit warm here.
Of course you do.
Because what would a college football podcast be without a little bit of carousel talk? And we'll take a quick look at first impressions now that we're at least 3 games in of what the big conferences look like and what we got coming up next week. Stick around, everybody. We'll be back in 2 minutes with that and more here on the review. This is the OSG on CFB on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
Everybody buckle up. Mom. Buckle up.
Let's go.
Buckle up.
Can we go to the store? Mom, can we get some ice cream?
Everybody, buckle up.
A lot goes on in the car, but you're in control. So only move when you hear the click that says they're buckled in. Never give up until they buckle up. Learn more at safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Welcome back to the Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch snuggling, ball chasing, face licking, and of course, companionship. Now, let's see him in action.
Look how he makes eye contact with his person.
That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive, and now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
Ah, the happy dance so common with this group.
But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
If you want to scale a mountain, buy boots. If you want to turn your crush into something more, say hi. At Country Financial, we know protecting the things you love and preparing for tomorrow start with simple steps. So we help you take small steps today with insurance and financial services that can have a big impact on your family's future.
For all your home, auto, and life insurance needs, call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871.
Thanks for sticking around through the break, everybody. It wasn't that long. At least I hope it wasn't that long and too
Depends
painful.
on the commercials.
Yeah, that it does. You are listening to The Review. We are the online sports guys, and we love to talk college football, which is what we're doing right here and now. Guys, we talked in the first block about some of the bigger games of the week, some of the upset games, some group of five teams kind of jumping up and biting the Power Five opponents in the rear end. And we talked about the teams already kind of on cruise control for the playoff. But this time I want to talk about some college football programs who might be in for a bit of a shakeup here as the season goes on. We talked last week about maybe USC being back. Well, that didn't last so long as the Trojans lost to BYU. And all of a sudden, Clay Helton's seat just went from what's a good way to put it? From jalapeno to habanero pepper high.
There you go. I could see that.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
And that's all in the course of one game. They lost in overtime to BYU 30-27. Is it safe to say at this point that we're probably going to see Urban Meyer or some other big name coach on the sidelines for the Trojans next year?
As long as he doesn't continue saying we, us, and ourselves in studio when discussing Ohio State highlights.
That's a good one. I think what has helped Clay Helton's case is the fact that Lynn Swann has stepped down. And, really, Southern Cal has the best talent in the Pac-12 South. So I don't know if this is the time it's going to happen, knowing what all USC is going through as a university rather than as an athletic department. So if they make a bowl this year, I think he's fine. I don't think Southern Cal right now wants to stomach a coaching change. And right now, Southern Cal is going into the teeth of their schedule because Friday night they host Utah. Mm-hmm. Then it's at Washington, and then they go to Notre Dame after a week off. So we're going to know where Southern Cal is. Obviously the Stanford win was huge. Whatever your thoughts of Stanford now is after the loss of UCF may have changed. But I don't think any change will be made right now. I mean, Kadan Slovis is actually playing well as quarterback, being thrust into duty. So there's some good positive signs. They still have excellent talent. It's tough to win in Provo, and that BYU team, while it may have some deficiencies, especially on the defensive end,
They're tough.
They're tough. They're physical. And Zach Wilson is one of the better quarterbacks in the country.
And God forbid you should ever be thrust into your duty.
Oh, we had to pause there for that, John, to drop that one in. Yikes.
Yep.
Want to talk about another game that really kind of caught my attention when I started reading about it, and that's the Arizona State win over Michigan State, which made Michigan State coach Mark D'Antonio not so happy after he thought his team had tied the game with 6 seconds left when Matt Coughlin drilled a 42-yard field goal, only to have a replay show too many guys on the field for Michigan State because they kind of had to rush the field goal team onto the field and somebody messed up. Bottom line, they move the ball back 5 more yards. This time, Coughlin misses the kick. Arizona State goes to 3-0. The Fighting Herm Edwards get the win. And D'Antonio wasn't so friendly to Herm at the end of the game. He was pissed off.
Well, I believe that's a him problem.
Yeah. Why was he so pissed off?
I don't know if it was at his team. I don't know if it was something that was said. I don't know if it was that they went to the replay because I wasn't watching it live when it happened. But it was an impressive win for Arizona State. That's the real big takeaway I got out of that game.
Yeah.
They're up to 3-0 on the year. They may very well be that one team that could challenge Utah, who looks like right now the best team in the Pac-12. That's a good win for Herm Edwards. It's a really good win.
Not in dispute.
Well, somebody on that coaching staff will probably got dressed down by Mark D'Antonio because there were 12 men out there, and that negated the field goal. And those are things you got to button down as far as when you get down to critical game situations. But, Arizona State proved that they could roll in the mud with a Big Ten team on the road. And to me, that was pretty impressive. And I was pleasantly surprised with how Arizona State is looking right now. And they may be, that team that kind of challenges Southern Cal. Maybe there's talent there. Jaden Daniels, he's a true freshman quarterback that Herm Edwards had to have, and he got him, and he's proving that even in the dens of the Big Ten Conference, he can perform. So impressive win by ASU.
And then we come to something that's going to light a little bit of a button under John.
A little bit of a button.
And that's
I can retire.
His Florida State Seminoles actually having a chance to beat number 25 Virginia, going into the fourth quarter with a 17-10 lead.
Mm-hmm.
Only to allow 21 points to the Hokies in the fourth quarter and lose 31-24. John, can we stick a nail in the coffin? Can we hammer it in? Is it done? Is it over?
God, I hope so, but I'm sure that some rich booster has a necklace of garlic that is around Willie Taggart at the moment.
Well, if you watched it, John, it was eerily similar to the 95 game when Warwick Dunn was stopped.
Yes.
This time it was Cam Akers, stopped 4 yards short in the same venue.
Yeah, but I believe that the 95 game had better clock management from the sidelines.
Agreed.
I believe that in the 95 game, there were not 5 personal foul penalties called against Florida State in the fourth quarter that helped necessitate the comeback by Virginia against Florida State in their own venue. And I believe, what's the phraseology this week? Is it conditioning? I forget the buzzword that was used after the game as to what the problem was this time. But honestly, The buzzword that I'm going to use is discipline, comma, lack of, because you cannot have as many penalties as you did in the fourth quarter with a lead, and then also as you're driving down, then have horrendous clock management. You have an undisciplined team, which to me means that the coaching isn't there. So I'm trying to be as calm about this as humanly possible, because as this continues,
come on. Mad and Angry Ranting John's the best John.
Because I mad and angry ranted last week. All I'm going to say before, Wilkie, I send it to you is this. However long Willie Taggart lasts is entirely too long. This was not the hire that they needed to make. He is completely out of his element. And what Florida State will have done by the time they bring in another coach is waste an entire decade of possible productivity. Oh, they'll find folks who will be more than happy to jet that escape clause, and they'll figure out a settlement. You will have wasted an entire decade of productivity. The last elements of the coach that quit, the elements of this particular administration with Willie Taggart, and then if you exhibit patience with whomever you bring in to Tallahassee to coach this program, if you give full patience, that's 5 years, because everyone from the coach that quit, everyone from Willie Taggart, they have to be purged. You have to bring in your own guys. You have to bring in your own system. That is 9 years, if not 10, by the time this cycle will have gone through. In the Atlantic Coast Conference, you have become a paper tiger. You have become irrelevant. Thank you to everyone in an administrative capacity in Tallahassee, Florida, for making this happen and rendering Florida State University football neutral.
They've been neutered.
Is it my turn now?
Sure. Go right
Florida
ahead.
State's defense actually, I thought, played well. Where they got, screwed was the 3 and outs by FSU in the fourth quarter, and that defense was tired and couldn't get a rest because Florida State couldn't sustain the drive in the fourth quarter, which showed why he's a good quarterback. The second, probably the best quarterback not named Trevor Lawrence. By driving Virginia in for the game-winning score. So there were some positives there for Florida State. The other thing too is the ACC Atlantic. Well, it's Clemson's the win, but who's the second best team in that division?
But there isn't one.
There's a good argument that even at 1-2, Florida State's the best team and still second best team in the Atlantic, because Wake Forest is undefeated and they're airing it out. But I think the jury's still out on them, and the rest are just
the Atlantic
mediocre at best.
Is screwed.
Yeah, it's more of a statement on the Atlantic than it is to give credit to anybody else.
I'm just glad for the first time in 15 years it's not my worry.
Guys, you want to talk about?
Here's where under normal circumstances, Wilkie would have gone to Ulta or gotten an Amazon shipment from Elizabeth Arden and pulled out a little canister of lipstick, found a farm animal, and would have tried to connect one to the other. Yeah. Thankfully, we don't get to see that.
Yeah.
Ooh. I don't know if I want to even. I don't even know if I want to go there in my brain.
It's a certain network's problem now.
To not be named here. Guys, want to look ahead a little bit to next week's schedule. We got, after 3 weeks of primarily cupcake games or paycheck games or whatever you want to call them, the big boys are starting to pair off a little bit here in week number 4. I see a couple of games on the board that really catch my attention, one of them being Michigan at Wisconsin. Could be potentially a game to eliminate at least one of those two teams from the Big Ten 4 weeks into the season.
Can we just eliminate them both? Because I don't know what Michigan team we have, and Wisconsin will kind of be there at the end, even though they really won't, as another one of those teams that looks good because of their pedigree, but by the end of the day, they're going to be in a second-tier bowl. Wilkie, I just don't see anything. I think that this one is a game where they mutually destruct, and the final score is -5 to -5.
So you're saying they'll be scoring challenged?
Yes, it will be. Take the under.
I think this game is over with under 3 hours because both are going to run the ball down your throat, even though
True.
Shea Patterson is going to try to air it out. They're going to have to run the ball to be successful against Wisconsin because the Badgers are going to control clock as much as they can.
And they can do that with Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, with Jonathan Taylor, they can do that. So to me, it's a pick 'em.
Yeah, and as much as I said there at the beginning in the intro that it's an elimination game, I wouldn't be surprised to see Wisconsin win. The problem is I would not be surprised to see Wisconsin lose a game later in the season they shouldn't, because that's what they do every year.
Check.
But the Buzzards might be circling over Jim Harbaugh a little bit closer if the Wolverines don't manage to win this game, because the expectation level for him in Ann Arbor this year is pretty damn high.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Guys, you see some other games here that jump off the schedule and really kind of catch your attention?
I kind of like this Cal-Ole Miss matchup in Oxford. We're going to see what kind of Ole Miss team are they going to get 6 wins, perhaps save Matt Luke's job. Cal's playing really well, and this is a game I want to see. I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Well, you've already mentioned Utah and USC. That one for me is out there, obviously. You've got LSU and Vanderbilt. We saw what LSU could do. Really, that Northwestern gets the 7 on the board. They're down 7-3, and then apparently Joe Burrow decided to get everything squared away and for his Heisman run. Tennessee and Florida, which with Florida not having Felipe Franks and Tennessee being Tennessee, and Jeremy Pruitt actually surviving a game after putting 45 on Tennessee Chattanooga in the first half. That one for me is out there as well. You got Washington and BYU, Auburn and Texas A&M. That one's in College Station. So how much of the playbook does Bo Nix get as they go to College Station and get rid of that one?
Yeah, I love that matchup. I love that one. That's appointment television.
Yes. And then apparently some team is making a trek to Athens, Georgia that we're supposed to know about.
Oh, the Gold Helmets.
Yeah, I was going to get to that there at the end, because I think that's probably your real marquee matchup with game day being there and all that. Primetime, 8 o'clock CBS game. Notre Dame goes into Sanford Stadium to play the Georgia Bulldogs. Both teams have been, for the most part, pretty dominant early in the season. We're about to see who gets the better of playing a full game instead of a half game, as the starters have done.
Well, I love Georgia in this game because of their ability to stretch the field, and their ability to bring waves of running backs. Notre Dame has not seen anything like that this year. And so I really like, obviously, what Georgia can bring to the table. I mean, Louisville gave the Fighting Irish, although it was the first game of the year in Louisville, gave them all they wanted. And Notre Dame got off to a slow start. They can't get off to a slow start between the hedges. Because it could get away from the Irish. But what I've seen Georgia in person, and I'm not even talking about their skill players. Both sides of the line are just dictating the terms. And I can see that happening pretty quickly next Saturday in Athens. So I like Georgia this one.
And I'll give you 2 more. I've got Colorado and Arizona State, so we can take a look at the Fighting Mel Tuckers and how does Herm Edwards' team respond after the big win on the road. And if everything that you tried to do involving your juice boxes completely goes to the wayside, Central Arkansas visits Hawaii on the Big Island, and that's your late game next week.
The UCA Bears. on the Big Island. Another one I want to point out, because I think there's going to be buku of points scored, is Oklahoma State, Texas. And
I like.
There's going to be a lot of points in that game.
I like the over. Yes.
Are we talking about the runner-up to Oklahoma in the Big 12 this year?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Texas fans, I said it.
So
prove me wrong.
Yes, prove me wrong.
What do you say we wrap things up, guys? We've talked for about 40, 45 minutes or so.
Sounds like a show.
Wilkie, why don't you talk briefly here before we wrap up about the rivalry show, because you've gotten some great guests and some great games to talk about.
Yeah, the rivalry and trophy game show. We've been dropping it on Thursday nights. And yes, we've been lucky. We've been able to get some really good play-by-play voices from the Power and Group of Fives, and then from FCS, and then the Division III rivalries have really kind of made the show. This week we've got New Mexico State. We've got the Iron Skillet between TCU and SMU. Some really good D3 matchups as well. You can catch those as well as all of our podcasts on our host network, Spreaker, and as well as Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, and barnburner.ca. So it's been a lot of fun putting those together, and we're more than happy with the response we've been getting.
Well, good thing is, John, he did all the promos for me, so I don't have to do that part of it. So at this point, we'll show the phone app. Here's the iTunes version for those of you into such things. John's got the Google Play version.
Check.
And we will wrap things up for this week's review. For Brother Wilkie and for Brother John, I am OSG Phil. I will say goodbye to everybody and thank you for tuning in this week. We'll be back next week. Make sure you check your app and all your updates over the course of the week for all of our new programming. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a great week. Bye.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
German? Forget it, he's rolling.
It ain't over now.